The blue meth isn't the most unrealistic thing in Breaking Bad, it's the money. For a show that built its empire on realism, Breaking Bad somehow got the one thing it should have gotten right, the price of crystal meth, completely wrong. It's hard to believe that Vince Gilligan's masterpiece, which is so careful with chemistry and character, falls apart as soon as you apply even the most basic knowledge of drug economics. Honestly, the numbers are just silly. Let's start with the core offense, the street price of the fabled blue meth. The show says that Walt's product sells for $50 a gram at the store, but on the street it sells for $175 for a 16th. That's not even a 2 times return for taking on the most risk in the whole distribution chain. In reality, no one with half a brain is standing on a corner and risking jail time just to double their money. These people don't sell on Etsy, they sell drugs. Like any black market, the meth economy is based on scale and spreading out risk. Your supplier, like Gus Fring, is at the top. They move products that weigh hundreds of grams to kilograms. He sells to mid-level operators who may or may not break it down even more before giving it to street-level dealers. The price per gram goes up at every step to make up for the higher risk and lower volume. But Breaking Bad turns this whole hierarchy into a cartoonish pricing model, where Walt seems to sell in bulk and the street dealer still makes only a small profit. It's drug math in a police press release, where street value is a made-up number that makes a bust seem more important than it really is. In real life, a kilogram of meth might go for $5,000 in a border state. A street-level dealer buys grams for $25 to $30 and sells them for $50 to $100 depending on location and purity. It's not hard. It's also not the fantasy that the show is selling, where Walt's 38-pound deal magically makes $1.2 million. At realistic prices, that haul might fetch $150,000. Tops. Gus wouldn't be writing million-dollar checks unless he was buying actual metric tons of something or washing the money through car washes and chicken joints. Next is the comparison to cocaine. That even makes more sense than the meth math. People have sourced bricks of cocaine for $9,000 wholesale. A pound costs $400. The margins make sense. But meth is even cheaper to make because it is synthetic. Walt and Jesse's blue stuff might be pure, but that doesn't change how the market works. Just because you wore a hazmat suit while making industrial chemicals doesn't mean you can charge Louis Vuitton prices for them. The only reasonable explanation is the market abroad. There. Walt's meth might be worth more because it is pure. But what about at home? Nobody is going to pay $1.2 million for a few dozen pounds unless they believe in the blue myth. And maybe that's the point. Breaking Bad isn't a show about drugs. It's a fairy tale where chemistry teachers turn into criminal masterminds, and the laws of economics get broken along with the meth. As for the armchair experts who loudly talk about their own made-up prices and what it used to go for, yes, congratulations. Bragging about past addictions and arguing about drug prices that have been adjusted for inflation like it's the stock market is not a good sign of being well adjusted. Breaking Bad may have gotten the psychology of desperation right, but what about the economics of meth? It fails badly. Breaking Bad's smartest enforcer turns into a plot device, and nobody talks about it. For a show that usually has great writing, Breaking Bad has a strange change in Mike Ehrmantraut after Face Off. At first glance, the change doesn't seem obvious, but it's there, without a doubt. When Gus Fring is blown to bits on screen, Mike not only loses his boss, but he also seems to lose his character. Before Face Off, Mike is exact, quick, and unnervingly calm. He is the silent enforcer of Gus's criminal empire and the physical extension of Fring's surgical control. Every move Mike made seemed planned and based on a goal that, while morally unclear, was at least consistent. He didn't want things to be crazy. He was the very definition of order. Then Gus dies, and all of a sudden, Mike's accuracy turns into a man who talks like a bad version of himself. Lines that used to have a lot of weight now sound like something a grumpy hitman would write. Mike can be emotionally broken. He's a widower, a grandfather, and a man who knows how much violence costs. But the way the show shows that happening is wrong. It's not that the man is getting worse, it's that the writing about him is getting worse. The most generous interpretation is that Mike is in trouble. He is no longer anyone's right-hand man now that Gus is gone. He's not making moves, he's responding to them. That change makes him a narrative passenger, though, since his strength was always in taking action in a planned and proactive way. Suddenly he's just in the game, to collect his cut, babysit Jesse, and endure Walt's growing tyranny. And yes, his world is falling apart, his boss is dead, the DEA is closing in, his money is in danger, and now he has to deal with Lydia's crazy behavior. But Mike feels strangely passive for a man who used to be known for being clear about his plans. He seems to care less. He seems to have been written with less care. Better. Call Saul, of course, gives this arc a retroactive structure. We learn that Mike has always had a quiet sadness. His skills have never hidden his fatalism, especially when it comes to making sure Kaylee has a good future. After Gus, We see fatalism come back. Some people might say that this change is on purpose and that we're watching a broken man give up. But if that's the case, it doesn't have the same level of drama as the rest of the show. The change isn't hard to believe, it's just that the show doesn't quite earn it on screen. Yes, Mike is different, but not always in a way that feels like real growth. The bigger problem is that after Face-Off, Mike starts to feel like a piece of a puzzle that has already been put together. He can't connect without Gus. He doesn't have a long-term plan, a crew to run, or a real enemy to defeat. Even when he's working with Walt, he's not the same man we knew. He's more of a frustrated observer. He no longer controls the story. Instead, he floats through it, becoming more and more different from the man we first met. Some people may think that makes perfect sense. How does someone get back to normal after everything they worked for is burned to the ground? But the problem isn't that Mike is lost, it's that the way he is portrayed doesn't fit with the careful way his story was told in the first place. In the end, Mike Ehrmantraut after Face-Off doesn't seem like a man who is falling apart. He seems like a character the writers don't know what to do with anymore. Never bring back a character who died perfectly. Bryan Cranston recently hinted that he might return as Walter White in Breaking Bad. Apparently television hasn't had enough resurrections yet. Yes, Walter White, the chemistry teacher who turned into a meth kingpin and died at the end of Breaking Bad for all intents and purposes. But when has death ever stopped a franchise from getting one last bit of nostalgia? The idea of Breaking Bad 2 is less about being creative and more about giving fans what they want. Anything that came after Breaking Bad, including El Camino, felt like what happens when a great show doesn't know how to end. These spin-offs don't add to the story. Instead, they risk watering it down and becoming self-parody with each new version. Putting familiar faces on a screen and calling it canon won't bring back the spark that made the original so famous. There is no more story oxygen in the room for Walter White. He passed away. It was clear. That was the point. The man's journey came to an end, both morally and physically. But here we are, playing with the idea that he could somehow make it through and leave the hospital with an M60 in his hand, spitting out catchphrases like a broken action figure. No more half measures. I am the one who knocks. Be careful. It could Chen Q applause. At this point, it's not even a parody, it's self-inflicted satire. A prequel? Not a chance. Cranston has clearly gotten older, and trying to turn back the clock would feel like digital taxidermy. So what's left? Different timelines? Ghost stories that are fueled by meth? Mario Kart with Walter White? Which, to be honest, would be more honest about how cartoonish this has all become. If anything needs to be explored, it's not Walter White's decomposed story. A prequel about a young Mike Ehrmantraut, for example, his time in Vietnam, the trauma that shaped him, and his move into law enforcement could be a new way to tell the story without bringing up things that have already been settled. But another trip with Walt? Give him a break. Not everything needs a sequel, especially when all you can say is, look, he's back. Breaking Bad didn't leave any questions unanswered. Bringing its body back into the light only shows one thing. Some storytellers just don't know how to say goodbye. You've been lied to about who Gus Fring really is and why Don Eladio feared him. It's both ridiculous and fascinating that Gustavo Fring, the perfect, soft-spoken poultry mogul, exists at the crossroads of corporate legitimacy and underworld dominance without answering to anyone but a Mexican drug lord. It's not just strange, that's almost like a myth. Fring acts like a made man with a boardroom, but there isn't a single board of directors in sight. No stockholders, no supervision, just Los Pollos Hermanos, a laundry facility that works on a large scale, and a polite nod to magical electromotive, all of which somehow work without the usual red tape. He's the American dream through the Andean dictatorship, a black Chilean businessman who doesn't answer to anyone, except for the rare bow to Don Eladio. It looks like he can't be bothered by corporate interference on purpose, not by accident. Everything about Fring's empire screams control and precision. Even the fact that Los Pollos Hermanos doesn't seem to be set up to be a franchise. Gus doesn't want franchisees, so there are no franchises. Gus doesn't want questions, so there isn't a board. It's likely that the businesses are LLCs because this type of business structure gives the least amount of oversight and the most freedom, which is exactly what someone with a shady past and a plan based on revenge would want. Ah, the past. That hard to find, well-kept story of where it all began. The show drops just enough to tease. Talk of a strong military link in Pinochet's Chile, Don Eladio's mysterious "I know who you are," and then nothing. This means that Gus wasn't just a businessman in his home country, he was a person. Someone who scared even Eladio. And yet, there's a strange story that tries to make his rise seem unlikely, as if it is hard to believe that he is in a Latin American cartel. This doesn't take into account the subtleties of the region. Gus is not an outsider in that world because he is Chilean, not a gringo. In Mexico, his accent, cultural background, and skin color might make him interesting, but they don't make him impossible. But the drug trade in Latin America is not a happy place where everyone gets along. Mexico and South America have complicated and often negative views of each other. Nationalism is strong, but racism is even stronger. Mexicans often think of South Americans as trashy or low class, which is ironic because these differences often go away when money, drugs, and power come into play. That's what makes Gus Fring so interesting. He doesn't just live in this world, he does well in it, without any visible allies, no equals, just a smile, a chicken, and a quiet that makes men uneasy. You don't have to like the chicken man, but you do have to respect him. Binge watching ruined your memory of the greatest shows ever made. It's strange how your memory changes when you watch a show like Breaking Bad again. Looking back, it seems like a slow burn, a moody, careful, and gradual descent into moral decay that must have taken a long time. Then the first episode starts, and it feels like the whole first season has been crammed into 47 minutes. Wasn't this the build-up to the real story? That's what it looks like. A binge makes time go by faster. At first, Breaking Bad seemed methodical because it aired once a week. The tension lasted for months of watching. But when you watch it again, especially without commercials, long waits, or real-life distractions, it's amazing how quickly the story moves forward. A chemistry teacher with a calm demeanor is making meth and getting rid of bodies before you've even put dinner in the microwave. This isn't something that only happens in Breaking Bad. The Sopranos, another huge hit on prestige TV, has the same problem with memory. There are times when whole story arcs that were thought to last all season are actually resolved in just 2 episodes. That awful tension between Tony and Melfi that you said would last forever? Blip. Gone in the time it takes to scroll through Instagram. The shows haven't changed. How we watch them has. Weekly episodes let stories breathe and stay in your mind. Characters change slowly. Plots were boiling. Now, binge watching speeds up those long arcs into short stories. Emotional journeys that used to take 6 months now take place in the one afternoon. We often feel nostalgic for how we used to watch slow TV. The speed is still the same. Our patience has changed. So when someone watches Breaking Bad again and is amazed at how fast it goes, they are both right and wrong. The story hasn't gotten faster. We've just learned to eat it all at once instead of savoring each bite. Here's what no one admits about Hank's death. Walt didn't have to pull the trigger to be guilty. By the end of Breaking Bad, Skyler and Walter Jr. are haunted not by the truth, but by the unbearable weight of probability. Walter White is the only one who can afford to tell the difference between pulling the trigger and loading the gun when it comes to Hank's death. Skyler's fight with Walt about Hank's death says a lot. She accuses him, and he pulls back, saying he tried to save Hank. But by that time, Skyler has learned how to manipulate people like a pro. Her husband is a liar, a criminal, and a narcissist who is so obsessed with being the smartest person in the room that he ruined many lives, including Hank's. Walt was the one who planned the events that led to Hank's death, whether he gave the order to kill him or not. Skyler doesn't need a confession, she has the evidence. Walter Jr., on the other hand, doesn't need any hard proof to reach the same conclusion. His last memories of his father are of chaos, finding out that the man who raised him was a drug lord, fighting with his mother, and kidnapping his baby sister. Then Marie tells them about all the horrible things Walt has done, like the nursing home explosion, the prison massacres, and the meth empire. Even though no one said he killed Hank, it's clear what they meant. And to a teen who's already been hurt and betrayed, nuance doesn't matter. Guilt is guilt. Skyler, on the other hand, is no longer interested in breaking down levels of responsibility. When Felina comes out, what Walt did or didn't do is no longer important. He was a part of it. That's enough. Walt's choices put Hank in that desert, and Walt's choices brought a group of white supremacists to their door. Skyler thinks that whether Hank died by Walt's order or someone else's hand is just a footnote in a tragedy written by Heisenberg. There's also the practical side, keeping Junior from seeing how bad it really is. Skyler may have let people believe that Walt killed Hank outright, or even pushed them to believe it because it served a purpose. It made the separation stronger. It made Walt impossible to forgive. It made it possible to deal with. What could be worse than the truth? That the man you loved or the father you trusted might still be lying, even if he feels bad about it? So no, Skyler and Junior might not think that Walt pulled the trigger himself. But to them, he might as well have. That's the point. Details don't matter in the moral wasteland that Walt made. The result is blood, and it's his fault. Walter didn't break bad in the RV. He broke in the basement and no one talks about it. Breaking Bad is a show about moral decay, and it doesn't take long for murder to happen. Walter White has already killed 2 people by the end of the 2nd episode. Emilio is now just a pile of goo in an RV, and Crazy 8 is thought to be dead. So why does the story pretend that Walt's later killing of Crazy 8, when he turns out to be alive, is a big moral turning point for him? The whole arc seems to be off at first. Walter gasses 2 men in a panic-filled trap full of chemicals and leaves without a second thought. He seems more upset about the logistics than the loss of life, if anything. But when Jesse finds Crazy 8 alive and chained up in his basement, the mood changes completely. We are now supposed to see Walt's choice to kill as a huge step into darkness, but hadn't he already gone too far? The difference isn't in the fact that murder happened, but in what kind of murder it was. Walt's first kill, Emilio, was quick, impersonal, and clearly in danger. A perfect example of how to protect yourself in a dangerous situation. At first, Crazy 8 was just collateral damage. The math changes completely when Walt finds out he's still alive. This is where it matters. Walt doesn't kill Crazy 8 in a fit of rage. After days of mental fighting, he kills him slowly. He gives him food, speaks to him, finds out about his life, his father's furniture store, and what kind of sandwiches he likes. Crazy 8 is no longer a target, he is now a person. Walt doesn't kill a dealer in a gas mask whose name he doesn't know. He strangles a man whose trust he has halfway earned. That's the most important difference. The RV incident was brutal, but not known. Violence through a window of science. The basement was small, painful, and planned. Walt hesitates even after he finds the broken plate and confirms that Crazy 8 is going to kill him. The threat is real, but it's not close enough to break up the bond they formed. Killing someone you know in cold blood is a much bigger moral crime than hitting someone when you're angry. The show makes this change clear by making Walt get his hands dirty. Literally, no beakers, no gas clouds, a bike lock, and 2 people shaking hands. It takes both physical strength and mental surrender to commit murder. It's not just that Walt kills again, it's that he chooses to do it, fully aware of what he's doing and without any adrenaline to hide behind. So in a way, Walt had already killed, but not this way. Not slowly, not personally, and not with the full weight of what it means to end a life on his chest. That is what makes him break. That's what makes him who he is. Not the killing itself, but the change into someone who can explain it after days of doubt and sharing sandwiches. Lydia Rodart Quayle isn't a secret. She is just like a spreadsheet in human form, and no, her last name doesn't make her Mexican. For a character who's all about precision and control, Lydia Rodart Quayle certainly gets a lot of people talking about her name and what race she is. The hyphenated last name has sparked a strange and ongoing argument. Is she Hispanic? Is she from Scotland? Is she just allergic to simple things? Let's begin with the name. Amateur genealogists have been going crazy over Rodart Quayle. Rodart is a common last name in Mexico, while Quayle is more Scottish. But let's not act like hyphenated last names are a sure sign of an ethnic group. They are not only for Mexicans, and they don't stand for cultural identity. A lot of the time, they're just picky. And let's not forget that Lydia is very picky. Some people have said that her daughter's fluent Spanish is a sign, maybe a cultural breadcrumb. What could be a more likely explanation? The babysitter. In Lydia's world, every job is outsourced, managed, and scheduled to death. Learning a language, assigned, love, most likely set for Wednesdays between board meetings. Some people also think she doesn't look or seem Hispanic. And what does that even mean in a post-colonial world where people come from all over the world, including Europeans, indigenous peoples, Africans, and everyone else? If the goal is to put her ethnicity into a box based on her skin color or accent, good luck. Because she was never written to, she doesn't fit into neat demographic boxes. She does seem very practical though. The type of woman who'd hyphenate her last name not out of cultural tradition, but to ensure her child carries both family legacies, hers and her ex-husband's. A woman who thinks about every little thing, even the punctuation in her signature, as a matter of strategy. Then there's Laura Fraser, the actress. She was born in Scotland but is hard to find on screen. Her acting is so precise that she could be from anywhere or nowhere at all. That's the point. Lydia is not supposed to show a culture. She shows how good branding can be a form of control and anxiety. In the end, trying to figure out Lydia's ethnic background misses the big picture. Her identity is not based on her heritage. It's about what it does. She is less of a character and more of a businesswoman in heels. Her cultural ambiguity makes her even more terrifyingly effective. There's one moment in Breaking Bad where Hank could have forgiven Walt. After that, it's over. Hank Schrader could have caught Walter White in a very short amount of time and still felt sorry for him. But when the bodies started to pile up, the meth empire grew, and Walt's lies became almost sociopathic. Hank saw no way for him to redeem himself. What's the most important point between the first time Walt cooked and the first time he killed someone? If Hank had found out about Walt's criminal secret right after that bad RV desert cook, before Crazy 8 was strangled with a bike lock, before the acid baths in plastic tubs, there might have been room for sympathy. Hank isn't just a DEA agent, he's also a family man. A man who might have seen his brother-in-law, who was dying of cancer, desperately trying to take control. Maybe it was temporary insanity brought on by death. He could have stepped in quietly, gotten Walt a lawyer, and pushed the system to be more lenient. Perhaps. But as soon as Walt started piling up bodies, even if it was self-defense, the story went from one of desperation to one of power. From then on, Walt wasn't the man who broke down when he found out he had cancer. He was Heisenberg, a smart and driven criminal. Hank is very strict about morals, but he does draw the line at murder. When Hank finds out the truth in that unforgettable garage scene, it's not just about the meth anymore. It's about the lies, the manipulation, and the danger that Walt has put Marie, Skylar, and even Walt Jr. in. Walt made fun of Hank's job and the law itself. At that point, forgiving would be betraying yourself. Some people think that Hank might have had some leeway until the Badger bust, but by that time, the blue meth had spread throughout the area like a plague, and Heisenberg's reputation was growing. At that point, sympathy turned into humiliation for Hank. Every day Walt got away from him was another day he failed as a DEA agent, and Hank doesn't like being humiliated. If Walt had confessed early on, maybe during Hank's first investigation at the high school, or before the blue stuff hit the streets, Hank might have been able to understand it. Maybe. But as soon as Walt started working with Gus Fring, when $500,000 in drug money was on his floor, and when Skylar got involved, the game was no longer about staying alive. It was about building an empire. And Hank, for all his flaws, doesn't let empire builders off the hook, especially when they sit across from him at dinner and act like everything is fine. Subscribe for more breakdown.